Okay, hi again, Grandma. Today is April 23rd, 1992.
I have to say it now.
That's it, we're fine.
Are you recording now?
Yep, we're good. Okay. Let's start back into your childhood just a little bit longer. And I want to ask you, can you think of any smells that remind you of your, or can you talk about any of the smells that you might remember when you were a child?
Yeah, well, I can remember a pleasant smell was, we have in the spring, we had a holiday. And instead of Christmas, in the spring, I don't know what you call the 40 days after
Lent?
Easter.
Lent?
No, 40 days after Easter.
Oh.
I don't know, it's a church holiday. When I think it's when Christ flew to heaven or something like
whatever.
that. Anyway, it was a spring holiday, and in our country they had a lot of birch trees. And like we put here a Christmas tree, of course that was a wonderful smell, the Christmas tree, because we always had fresh Christmas tree, and they were not put in as early as they do here. They put them maybe a week before Christmas Eve, and then the whole house smelled like pine needles, and we loved that smell. When you came in, you smelled the whole house pine needles. And then in the spring, we put young little birch trees in each corner, in each room. And the birch trees over there are not like here. They have a wonderful smell. Even to the point where they used to make a drink of the birch sap. They called it birch water. And it was a cold drink that people used to drink in the summer. I think they took that zapped the water from the birch trees and put a little lemon rind or something in and kept it so many weeks. And it was a wonderful, something like Sprite or 7-Up or so, very nice. Well, that reminds me of these birch trees, and we loved that smell of the birch trees in early spring.
Were they potted? Did you keep them?
No, they were cut like Christmas tree, and they were put in a container of water so they didn't wilt right away. But, and it was all through the country, everybody did it. That was a habit there.
Did you just go out and cut them?
No, I think people sold them, brought them to the house or what. I really don't know. Mm-hmm. I had no idea how we got all the things. We didn't have food markets like they have here. We had a man come in. They had a little grocery store. A man, and he would have an employee. And this employee came every week, and he had a big board on his shoulder. And my mother had to give him an order, what she needed. How much flour, how much coffee, how much this. Oh yeah, and then I have to tell you a very amusing thing that I die laughing. I don't know, it's very noisy, Cindy. But, also we had kerosene lamps, and he brought a big container of kerosene, and he always held it between his feet. He was standing up, and he had this kerosene container, and dipped it, and then he poured it, through a funnel into the different lamps. And we kids always thought he made pee-pee, It looked just like that. And we always laughed so much when he did that. Also, like the butcher, that was a different store again. See, they was not like you could order everything from one store.
They came to you.
They came to us, and my mother gave them the order, and then they brought it in. And I know he had a big wooden board like on his shoulder, and it was like a trough, or how do you pronounce that word?
Trough. Uh-huh.
Trough. Mm-hmm. And there were all these big roasts and chickens and whatever they had ordered. But he came once, I don't know, was it every week or every 2 weeks, and then he brought in the orders. And we were very, very interested. We loved to be there when that man from the groceries came, because he brought, a big bag of barley or things, and then he filled it into containers that we had in our kitchen, And I still hear that noise. I was always fascinated by the noise when that barley was rolling into the containers, and things like that. Now,
any other smell?
The most terrible smell was the smell of our privy, you call that? Mm-hmm. Because we didn't have a water toilet. Over there they call it closet, which is like closet, but it was a little room. That was much later on, but when I was a little girl, we had to go out a few steps, and there was a landing, and there was a door where they had a little toilet, with a hole. It was not as primitive as here. The hole was enameled, like our sinks in a bathroom, white enamel and all that, and that was always scrubbed. So, but all the, I don't want to say that word, all the excrements, they just flow down in on the bottom, we lived on the second floor, so they must have gone way down in a cellar, in the ground. There was a big, like they have here, not sewers, what they call it, cesspool, like a cesspool, and everything went in there. And of course, it was always very clean, and it always smelled like Lysol and thing in the air, and I always remember that. But then, once a month, that man came with a big truck, and he was somehow pumping the whole thing out into that container on a truck, and that was really a stink. Everybody ran away for that day. Nobody wanted to be around it. It was outside. He took it from outside. But still, it was an awful smell. So those are the three smells I mainly remember.
So there was no running water in the toilet then?
No running water.
Yeah.
No.
But you had running water for a bathtub?
No, not at that time. At that time, when I would say up to my 10th year or so, we had no running water at all. We had a pump in our backyard, and of course we had a maid, and she always put that thing over her shoulders, whatever they call it in English, and there were two buckets hanging on, and she had to go down in the yard and pump these buckets and bring it up. In our kitchen we had a big barrel, the water barrel. It was just used for water, and I still remember it had a cover. The cover was half a lid, and there was it was fastened with a piece of leather, so you could lift one half of this thing, and then there was always a container that you could dip in, a dipper, to get the water out. That's what we used for drinking and so. And then laundry was washed in an extra little house. There was in our backyard, we had a great big backyard. There was a little house that contained a great big iron kettle. And I don't know how often, if I'd say once a week or once every 2 weeks, all of a sudden 2 women came in to wash laundry, and they made a fire under that kettle, and the first night they soaked everything. And then they took it out, and then the next day they put the soap and the water and all the laundry, and they had great big sticks, wooden sticks, and it looked like a witch's cauldron, with a big stick. They were stamping and stamping and stamping, and they had fire under the kettle, and it was boiling, and they had to boil it, and then they had to rinse it, and then they had to blue it. They always put bluing in laundry at that time.
Was that detergent?
Pardon me?
Was that like detergent?
Like what?
Detergent for laundry detergent?
No, it took the yellowish out of the linen. Everything was real linen at that time, the sheets and what. And here, kids, they change we only changed our underwear, I think, once a week when we got the baths after we got, every Saturday. In the kitchen was a big, not a barrel, what you call it?
Tub?
Tub, yeah, a big tub was put in. And then they heated the water and put it in a tub. And then every kid in succession, was put into that tub and scrub. And then we got clean nightgowns and everything were put in bed. And my grandmother, that was a day, we waited for it. She always, when we went into bed, she brought us milk and toast with cinnamon and sugar. Butter, cinnamon and sugar. That was, like a ceremony for when we had our bath. And of course, our stockings and stuff, they were all hand knitted, Cindy.
Who made those?
We had an old woman come in who only knitted stockings. White stockings, black stockings, long stockings, Then we had an old lady come in who was sewing and fixing all the clothes and mending and patching and all that, So there was, at that time, I'm sure they didn't pay much to these women, but they were happy to make a little money. And they came, and there was one room in our apartment just for the sewing room, where they did all that. And and that's what it was. Saturdays we always had a bath for Sunday to go to church. Sunday we had to go to church and be all clean and nice. And
well, you talked about people coming to your house. What about doctors and medication and that kind of thing?
I don't remember. I remember one. They called him the Felcher. I don't know if it's a German word or a Russian word. And he was a man who came. It was not a doctor. He was like a chiropractor maybe, in that rank he had. He knew a little bit about medicine or what. And when somebody was sick, he came in and he looked over and took the temperature, and gave advice. I don't even remember if there ever was sick and needed the doctor. But we had doctors, I know. To the doctor, I guess we had to go to his doctor's office or what. Because I don't remember that at all. Because we were healthy kids. I know we had measles and things like that, but they were all treated by this Felcher. He was, I still see his face. He was a fat Jewish man, with a big hook nose. We kids always made fun of him. And, behind the back. And I know that what was a great, great interest at that time, if somebody was sick or what, he came and he had these, what do you call them in English? Little, not snakes, not snails, something, they suck your blood suckers.
Leeches.
Leeches. That was a big deal. Everybody got sick first, they put the leeches on and things like that. And then of course they used a lot of compresses or mustard bandages or something. If you had a cold, they put mustard on your chest and or they heated up for something or other ailment, I don't know. They were bags and they heated up the sand and they put a bag on your... I don't remember, Cindy, because really we were very healthy.
What about toothpaste or toothbrushes? Did you guys have those?
Oh yeah, we had toothbrushes. We had tooth powder. There was no toothpaste yet. It was a powder. And we dipped our toothbrush in that and we had to brush them. And rinse and gargle. Gargle was a big thing.
What were they
I still do it, gargle.
What were they made out of? The toothbrush?
They're like our toothbrush. Well, they were not plastic, no. Wood, no, it was ivory. Ivory handles, yeah, I remember that. They were all made out of ivory and real bristles, And then we dipped it in that tooth powder and brushed our teeth and rinsed them.
Okay.
I love to look at you. You look so sweet.
Okay. Your action. When you were a child, is there something maybe you were afraid of, or that you can think of maybe that scared you when you were little?
I don't remember that. I was not afraid of the dark or what, because we had a sister and she always took us out and showed us the Milky Way and the stars and what. So we never were afraid of the dark. But I was terribly scared. I think I have never been as scared in all my life. I walked out we had a big yard. We lived in an old house. We had a big yard and a big garden. Of course, there was a fence around and was always locked. So very seldom strangers came in. And it was a day of an eclipse. And I had no idea that there would be an eclipse. I was playing around in the backyard and walking, and all of a sudden it got darker and darker. And I looked around, and the chickens started cackling, and the birds flew so excited around. And I looked up, and there was a Chinaman. It was already practically dark, and it looked so scary. It's a dark sky, and every middle of the day. And here I see this Chinaman in his black kimono, and at that time they wore their hair long and a braid. And his face was so yellow, and he was scared, and he looked around, and he ran back and forth, and he made the most horrible sounds. He must have talked Chinese, which sounded terribly, and all kind of sounds. And I was so scared, and I looked around, and I thought the world is going. I don't know what I thought, but it was terribly scary because it was a total eclipse. I don't know what year. If we could look back in history books or what, then you would know exactly how old I was. And it got so dark, of course, and then this Chinaman, I was scared to death, and I couldn't run upstairs fast enough to save myself. And that scared feeling, I'll never forget in all my life. I never was so scared.
Well, what were you afraid of? Was he going to hurt you?
I don't know what.
Oh.
I thought, I don't know, as a child, you don't think the world is coming to an end or what, but it must have been the feeling that something terrible happens. I'm all alone, and it's getting dark, and the light is going away, and this strange creature running around there and screaming, It was terrible scary. That's my biggest scare ever in my life.
Okay. Were you going to say something?
No.
Okay.
I don't know. I want to scratch my nose.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Okay. Well, you said you wanted to talk about your grandmother's hands. What do you
Yeah,
think?
we were talking about hands. Cindy asked me something. She says, I want to take the picture so that I can see your hands, because I talk a lot with my hands. And I'm thinking of my grandmother. She was in her 90s already. And her hands, she was sitting there, many times just thinking, and I don't know if she couldn't see well, that she read the Bible all the time. But I always know we children always went up to her, and the skin was so dry, and we loved to take that skin and pull it like that, because we couldn't understand why. See, I have it now too. My skin pulls. And we used to love and feel her big arteries and all that, And then she invented a little game. I think the children still play that. We used to take this skin, and then she put our skin, and one hand on the other, you change around. And then you go a little bit when every hand is on another, and then you start mixing up, and I don't know who the winner was. I don't remember anymore. But that I remember so well, how it was like a wonder to me. We had such firm skin, and Grandma's hands where you could take the skin and pull it, was really funny.
Okay.
I think we're going into too much detail, Cindy.
Now we're doing fine. Okay, we're going to talk about school now. Maybe
School?
Your schooling. What was your first school like? Do you remember your first years in school?
No,
Did you have
not at
kindergarten?
all. I don't remember. I know, well, we lived not far from school. We had to cross maybe like a short block here. We lived, our house was on a big alley that went straight to the Baltic Sea. We were very close to the sea, to the beach as we called it. And on this end, the one road, yeah, that I remember, that was a wonderful chestnut alley. They were all chestnuts. And we loved to go there in the fall, go through the leaves, make the noise, and collect the chestnuts. And these chestnuts we used to make toys. We put matches, stick matches in, they were our cows. We played farms, farmer, and we had made our cows and horses and all of these chestnuts, we stuck 4 little feet in, and if we had a little one for a head. But it was all done with chestnuts. They were so brown and shiny and beautiful. And, well, anyway, the school was not far from the beginning of that alley. And we didn't have far to go, just across that alley. No, you don't call it alley here. You call it promenade.
Okay.
Trees on both sides and a long road in the middle. Beautiful. I don't know what they call it here. And so anyway, there was a school, and my sisters, of course, they had all gone to school. And in Russia, we all wore uniforms. And we little children, we couldn't wait to get those brown dresses. They were brown dresses with long sleeves. Every day, a black apron over the brown dress, and that was a high collar with a little lace. I have one picture of myself. But on holidays or on special days, instead of black aprons, we had white aprons. And of course we had the high boots, I'll show you that picture. Okay. You laugh when you see it. And we couldn't wait to be able to wear the same uniforms as our bigger sisters did. That's all I remember. I don't remember I was not afraid to go or what.
Was it a
private? We were very eager.
Was it
that the Russian school was not a private school as much as it was a government school.
So all the children wore uniforms, whether it was...
All the children wore uniforms.
You always wore, and did they...
All. Even the boys, they looked like little soldiers. They had boys' schools. We didn't have mixed genders. There was only girls' schools and boys' schools. And the boys had uniforms with hats and with things, insignias on, and they looked like little soldiers. And we were all in these brown dresses, I still remember the long sleeves, and when there was a holiday, there was a little lace on the cuff and a little lace around here, And then we had all these different classes, I remember that we had every morning we had to sing a Russian song, Sproge, in Tchaikovsky's, they always play it here, and it always makes me laugh when they play the Russian anthem here. Any graduation, they play that, what is it, 1811 or
1812 overture?
Yeah, overture. And there is a hymn in it. We had to sing that every day, every morning we got together.
Do you remember it?
Oh, that I remember.
Well, sing it.
We all had to go into the big room, like here they get together in a gym, but that was more like a ballroom. Every school had a big room where they always got together and celebrated holidays and this. Every morning we had to do that. Like here, they salute to the flag, and we had to sing to the Tsar.
Can you sing it? Do you remember it?
I remember it, but I can't sing anymore.
Well, just so we can get an idea.
Well, it says,
You did it before.
I said, Я Боже, царя храни, сильный, державный, славу да славу, на славу нам. I forgot the words as it goes. There's something that we have to sing for his health and for his honor, and that he would be protected if the enemy comes and all that. Those were the words of that. And that I remember, that we met there every morning. And then we went into our different classrooms. Now, we didn't have here that you go from classroom to classroom. We had one classroom that was the first grade, let's say, and all the children sat there. And the teachers came to us. Then came the math teacher, and then he went out, and we had 10 minutes or 15 minutes recession, and we could do and jabber and laugh and stretch our legs. And then came the next, the Russian teacher, and then came the German teacher, and we had learned languages from very beginning elementary school. And French, I think we started in the 3rd grade. And but all the religious, we had religious instruction in school.
Really?
Yeah. We had math, literature or languages, and history. And then we had calligraphy. We had to learn how to write very beautiful, And then we had, one subject was handcrafts. Learn to sew, to embroider, cross-stitch and all that. And then there was another subject I wanted to...
Did you have gymnastics?
Gym?
Gymnastics?
Oh yeah, gym, of course. Well, gym, we had the gym room. And our gym was very, very extensive. When I came here and I saw the kids, the way the teachers take them out in the yard, and in the coats, and they lift their arms, I said, that is gym, that's terrible.
What was your
We
gym?
had to put a suit on, a gym suit, and go in. First we marched. We have to march and learn to march this way and that way and cross and whatnot. Then we did, always arms and legs and kick and that. And then we had, I was going to say instruments, but that's the wrong word. Machines, and the horse, the rings, and then they had ladders on the wall where we had to perform all kind of gym. And it was a whole hour, twice a week, We had a gym teacher who only taught gym, nothing else. And it was completely different than here.
So you looked forward to that? You looked forward to that?
Well, we liked everything. We loved school. And there was no such a thing like you hear here. The children are mischievous. I think they get so mischievous because after each lesson they start running around in the corridors and everything. We were sitting, when a teacher came in, we all sat so quiet and straight. And we were not allowed to lay down and write like here. This shocked me no end, And with Jenny, I was forever fighting. She lay like this, and because she's left-handed and wrote, I say, you have to sit straight and write. You go and get a curvature in your back or
So
what?
how come you think things are different now? Do you think it's the teachers or the children or
The
what's
teachers,
different?
the whole school system. It's just like we learned to read. In 6 months we could read because we learned the ABC. And we had to put this ABC together to form the words. Here they like, Jane loves Jane, or run Spot, or run Jane, or mother lives in the house, father lives in the house, They only learn a few words. All this whole school system, you shocked me. I don't understand how people altogether learn to read. That's why so many don't learn to read and write. But there was no question we could read because we had to learn the alphabet. We had to write maybe 10 pages, B, 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 till we knew what the B was, or an A, or a C, or what, And then when we knew all the letters, we put them together. But it's also the language. You see, we pronounced each letter. It was not, the same letter wasn't pronounced in different ways, like here. An A is an R at times it's an A, at times it's an And how can the children learn it? I don't know.
Well, we do somehow. We get by, I guess.
Yeah. Well,
we did okay. So did you wear uniforms until you were in 12th grade, or where?
Oh yeah, no, till then the war came, and the Germans came, and the Russian school stopped. We had to learn we learned every subject in the Russian language. That's why I still remember my Russian language. But then when the Germans came, everything was changed. We had to learn everything in the German language. And it was very hard, geography and the history and all that, to learn the German words and to express. But we made it somehow, I don't know.
What year was that? How old were you?
That was 1915. I was
11?
5 and 11 years old, yeah. So from then on, I learned everything in German. And then I went into a German private school, a girls' school. Because somehow or other, the Russian government was not there, the schools were all not destroyed, but dissolved. And they had different schools. So I don't know if everybody went to private school. No, they still had one Russian school that was called Chinka. I remember that. And we were like a little of a little better class people. I hate to say it now, because here I became so democratic. To me, all people are the same. And I would never send my children to private school. I wanted all my children to be with everybody and learn, because I knew what class distinction was. When I came here, I had really trouble to overcome it. But I couldn't help it. I was taught from little on. So anyway, then we didn't have to wear uniform in a private school. Everybody wore whatever they can. But it was such wartime and so bad, nobody had anything. We all were glad to have something on our body. And shoes, we learned to make shoes. They taught us how to make, we had shoes made of material, the uppers, and then the soles were made of rope. And we learned, we put the rope like this, and on that we walked. Or we had wooden shoes. The wooden shoes, they had a cloth uppers, but the bottoms, the soles, because no leather. The army took all the leather and everything away. And we had to have these shoes,
So was that tough for you, the wartime?
It wasn't tough at all, because everybody was in the same boat.
Yeah.
We didn't know it. We were happy, and maybe there were people who had more money, because we were not the rich class, we were a middle class. But there might be people who had more money and had more clothes or what, but we were not conscious of it at all.
Did you ever have to work while you were over there, or was it?
Well, when I was 14 or 13, I was excellent in maths. I don't know how that happened. I found my papers, my school papers.
Really?
Yeah, and excellent in math. And I had a little pupil who needed lessons. He couldn't understand math and that. So I gave lessons. I have a picture of that too. The pupil was almost bigger than I, and here I'm sitting, a little girl with my long braids, and I'm teaching him math. And what do you call the teachers when they get extra?
Tutors.
Tutors, yeah, I had to tutor him.
Why did they take a picture of you doing that?
The parents wanted. He was the father was a doctor, and he wanted his son, he was a beautiful boy, and to show how he's learning. So they took us or they called in a photographer, and he took his photographer picture, not a snapshot. And he took that picture of me and that little boy, and I'm teaching him. And then once I had later on, because I wanted money, we didn't get money from our parents or what. There was wartime. My father had enough to feed us, because he had lost his money, was in Russia, there was a revolution. All the banks were closed and nothing. So he had a hard time to get enough money to feed us, or we were so many kids too. And I gave not lessons, I was like a governess. There was a Jewish family, they were very rich, and they had a little girl, and she was a pupil of my sister. My sister took only very prominent artistic children. She taught music. I didn't tell you that. She was a music teacher. So she got me this job after school for 2 or 3 hours. I went every day there. I was either taking the girl out for a walk, because children didn't run around in the street like here. Either they were locked in the backyard, or they had somebody who took them out for a walk, And I took her for a walk, and then we came home, and she had to practice piano. I had to supervise that. She practices every day an hour or so. And I made money with that. And I saved up, and I bought myself a bicycle. Oh, what a proud. And I had my own bike.
Wow.
And I could ride around and ride along the ocean, the beach and all that. That was my biggest happiness.
Wow.
But we didn't get anything. What we had to earn it ourselves. You know? So, but I didn't feel like I was abused or what, that I had to work. We just did it, whatever came along, you know.
Yeah.
And we had fun too. And of course with the Germans, there came a complete change in my life. Because they had a scout, they brought something like a scout movement. And we had never heard about that. And they had hired a little room somewhere, and boys and girls came there, and they taught us folk songs and folk dancing, and they read to us and kept us, you know, busy. It was a real program. And we went on hikes. And ever since, I love to go hiking. And I love to go, we used to go out in the evening, you know, along the beach and singing all these folk songs and hiking and all that. It was wonderful.
Well, so then that was your first experience with boys.
That was my first experience with boys.
Right.
Although I had met my husband when I went to school. You know, the boys' school was on this side of town where I lived. And the girls' school was on the side of town where my husband lived. Well, he was only 14 years old, I think, at that time. And he was also in our club. Yeah, that's where I really met him. And he was so good looking. And he was excelling in every sport. And I really fell in love with him. You know, there's one sport where they throw...
Discus?
No, not discus. Like a spear, a long spear.
Yeah.
I forgot now, or I don't know what's called. But I've seen it in the Olympics. And he was excelling in that. And he was tall and slim, and he looked so gorgeous when he ran. And so, you know, that's when I fell in love with him. So I always looked for him when we went to school.
Javelin.
Oh, javelin. Yeah, javelin. That's it.
Okay.
Javelin was called. And besides, they had a sailboat. His family had a sailboat. At that time, you could belong to a sailing club. You didn't have to have millions. Whoever had a boat joined the club and kept the club, you know. And we went sailing together, he and his brothers, you know. And I and my sister and my friend, we all went always sailing. Because our town, on one side was a Baltic Sea, like an ocean with waves rolling in and dunes, you know, and all that. On the other side was a lake. That lake was about 30 miles long or more, you know. And in between was a harbor connecting this, you know, this lake with the ocean, with the harbor. Our town was known as an old harbor town. They had these old barns, you know, when all the trade was done by boat, brought in, because our harbor was ice-free. It was, at that time, the most north situated ice-free harbor. So the big boats came all in, and they had these big barns where they brought and put all their stuff in, you know, and all that. Some were 300 or more years old. They had the age on top of the roof. You know, they were built great with a big roof hanging like that. And they were from the time of Peter the Great.
Wow.
Yeah. And there were a couple old houses where Peter the Great slept here, you know, as they say, and all these things.
Mm-hmm.
So, how did I got about the sailing, you know, we went sailing. Well, anyway, how I really fell in love with him walking to school. And it was about the same distance from his house, from our house, to a certain Catholic church, a beautiful old Catholic church. And we had to come around. He came around this corner, and I had to go around this corner, you know. And I always waited for the church. I know I would meet him because school started at the boys at the same time at our school. And it was always exciting to think, will he come or did he go by already or did I meet him? But we saw each other almost every day.
Did he like you too? Did he like you?
He liked, well, I don't know. At that time I didn't know. But when we were in that in that club, boys club, there I could see that he liked me. Because I was lively and I was singing and, I was playing the guitar when we sang folk songs. And we were always all together and we danced. And every time we danced, we just felt that electric something, we were so happy. And when the boys had to choose a girl, he always chose me, and all kind of things like that. And little by little, I don't know, the funniest thing about that I can tell you now was that we always went to the ocean. If something bothered us, we went there to talk about it. If we had a fight, we went there and talked and straightened it out. And I know it was New Year's Day or something like, and all we kids, we always danced the folk dances at the beach there. Oh, we all run at the school. We couldn't get there fast enough to dance. It was so exciting, to sing and dance and with the boys. And, folk dancing is like square dancing. You reach out hands and you go under and make and all that. And you always were in contact a little bit with the boys. And so for us girls, it was very exciting to always meet boys. And that evening, I don't know, we had some kind of argument. And he and I, we walked along the beach and talked and went into the dunes. And I still see it was so quiet and it was foggy and cold, And all of a sudden, he put his arm around me and kissed me. And that, we were engaged.
Was that your first kiss?
The first kiss. And that meant we were engaged. We didn't know any better. Once you kissed, you were engaged, From then on, we always planned, that maybe we'll marry someday or what. And he went to my father and proposed, and he said, I want to marry your daughter. And my father looked at him, you're only a boy! And he was so insulted. And then he went to college, we finished school to Germany, and we wrote each other a lot of letters. I tore them all up because nobody would read them anyway. God, I was so smart, you should see that. I read it, I thought, did I write that? Philosophical and on religion and everything, I think. Nobody would read it.
Well, when you're in love,
I have one little love letter from him, which I never could part with. And it's still here in my things.
What did it talk about? What did it talk about?
No, it was at the time when I think I had Ralph already. And he was a private chauffeur and he had always go with his people away. And he wrote me a letter. And he said, I can translate it to you word for word. It's only a few words. How much he loves me and all that, I love you terribly, terribly, that word. But people always say, don't say terrible, because loving is not terribly. Terribly, terribly much, and all that stuff. And it's so sweet. There's only a few words, and that's what I say. So I wanted it mainly to read my daughter, that her father was not that bad like she makes him. So. Oh, did that come? Cut that out when you edit it. Please, yes, Cindy? I don't want that to be known by everybody.
The what? The daughter part?
No, that I said that I didn't want her to say that he's so terrible, like she always makes him. I don't want that.
You're her father?
It was her father. My husband is her father.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
She thinks he's awful?
Well, she thought he was terrible. She thought he was a drunk. He loved to drink. He was drinking heavy at times. But he had such a good heart. And he loved me and gave me so much love that I forgot all the bad things. There were plenty bad things.
Okay, we'll talk about him. You don't have to, I'll cut this out. I can cut this out.
But this here, what I said, that Haley doesn't think her father was, cut that out.
I will. Okay. Let's take a time out. Okay.
Okay.
So
well,
we were talking about your school years and high school. Did you have a graduation ceremony?
well, we did. We must have had some kind of ceremony because they presented us with all these certificates for our achievements. And then I know that we had a dance, a ball or whatever. It was in that big gym, and it was in wartime, and we all didn't have much clothes. I know that some of our mother rigged up something like a white corduroy, cotton corduroy, I don't know what they call that material, rep or something like it. And she had made the dress for me. That was my stepmother now. I was a very ungrateful child. I never appreciated what my stepmother did for me, because I always said if I had a mother, I would have a ball dress with laces and silk and God knows what. But she must have sacrificed to get this white material. And I know it was a skirt and a blouse and some kind of colored sash she had made. But we had no underwear or what. But I was very proud of it. I got no underwear. But at that time, when people could get from the soldiers' bags, where they got the sugar and the flour and that, and there was a big stamp on, with 5 pounds, 25 pounds of sugar or what.
And you wore that as underwear?
I had that for underwear. I had like a chemise, They used to make it at that time, pants and all in one. And on my belly I had this big sugar sign here around. I think people nowadays, and I don't know what shoes I wore, I don't remember. Anyway, I thought it was beautiful. I had long hair, I had braids, it was not curled or fluffed or done, everything, but I had new ribbons. My mother someone got new ribbons for me, and I thought it was beautiful. And, and all the children were more or less in the same boat. Nobody was dressed very elegant, whatever we could. Like coats, when we could get the coat made of a soldier's blanket, we were so happy because it was warm. Because all the material, everything was taken away by the German army for the soldiers or whatever. If they sent it home to their own people, they were all starving in Germany. Whole Europe was starving at that time.
So what year?
But it doesn't leave a bad impression. We were not unhappy. We were happy. We laughed. We danced.
What year was that you graduated?
I have to look it up.
Well, you were born
in the early 20s, 1922 or 21 or something like it.
Was there music at the dance?
Yeah, we always had music.
A band?
No, not a band, but we called people who played. The father played violin, the mother played the piano, or what. The parents got together and they made music. And I remember the waxed floor. The floor was waxed, beautiful. We could dance. We danced the polka and the waltz, and they had something like Pas d'Espagne and Vengerka, and some danced the tango. That was very, very forward already, to dance a tango.
Did you have a date?
I had, I don't know, I must have. I think it was, that Adolphe. No, a very good-looking young man. I had a couple boyfriends, besides.
Well, didn't Grandpa, you said you were 14 when you met.
Yeah,
and
but I don't know, he was, I think, in Germany already then. He wasn't there when I graduated. And I had some other boyfriends. We never thought about it, but there was never a shortage of boyfriends. Especially, I don't know, I was supposed to be the smartest. And, the boys, I had 3 or 4 boys. It was funny. When I started working in the office, when I came out in the evening, we had different office hours. Oh, is there my life? We had different office hours. We worked from 9 to 12, 9 to 1, I think it was. Then from 1 to 3, we went home to eat dinner. We were off. Then we had to come back around 4 o'clock, and we worked till 7 o'clock in the evening. So by the time I get out of my office, it was already dark. And there were 2 or 3 boys waiting for me to take me home. And I had such fun with that, Even fun. And that once Harald came too, and he was so insulted that other boys waited for me. He thought, he had priority. But those are little things that I remember, and they didn't mean much.
That's neat.
Yeah.
Did your family expect anything of you after high school?
No.
Did you have any idea?
No, we were very independent. We were raised very independent. My father was very liberal. Where at that time, like when I belonged to that club, where the girls and boys went on hiking trips, and we stayed overnight many times. We always had two leaders. They were like chaperones or what, of the soldiers, the German soldiers or what. But there was a big talk about it, that my father allows his daughters to go out overnight with boys, or what. And my father, that's when, it was all through the church. That's when he left church too, because he was very liberal. Like, for instance, at home, we could do what we wanted, but we had to be for dinner. If we were not on time at the dinner table, which was around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we didn't get dinner. There was no question about it.
Every
we
day?
killed ourselves every day to be there for the meal.
What about
and
school?
mean it. That's the only time he could see us, because he had 2 jobs. In the daytime he worked in the city hall, in the evening had another little in some kind of union as a bookkeeper, And
what time was school?
School was from 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the morning till about 2 or 3, whatever.
Well, how could you be home for dinner?
Anytime. It was so that we could be in time for dinner. Yeah. We always had to be for dinner, and in the evening for supper. Else he didn't ask us where we went to go, but we had to be there in time. And after supper we had to say thank you and kiss his hand. At that time you went up to your father and thanked for the meal and kissed his hand and said good night, Father. And then we could do what we want. We never went out at night really. We went into our room and were reading or doing whatever we wanted. But how did we get to that subject again?
I don't know. I forget.
Yeah.
So now you're out of
Oh yeah,
high
you
school.
said what I did if my parents expected me to do something or be something. No, you see, the wartime, there were no jobs. It was very hard. All my sisters and so, they were pre-revolutionary graduates. Because between my 3 sisters came my brother, who was raised in a boys school, just for boys, boarding school. Yeah, in a boarding school. Because we were 4 girls, no, we were 6 girls and 1 boy. We were 2 girls. My brother was in between. First were the girls and was he, and then my little sister from Lebanon and I. We were the 2 last ones, And so there was a big gap between the girls. And my brother was born in between. And they had all gone to college, And even my brother went to college already, just before the communism, before the revolution. It must have been 1916, 17 the revolution was. And he studied at that time medicine in Germany, And he didn't come back because he would have taken by the Russians and thrown to Siberia or what. So he stayed in Germany and he finished his studies over there. And my other sisters, Maria was finished with college already. She lived in our town again, came back, and she was an organist and music teacher. And my other sister, she was deep in Russia. She was teaching, she was a teacher too, at the Black Sea, there, Taganrog she lived. And she married there and she had 1 son. And then after 2 or 3 years revolution, we heard that they came one night and took her husband, and the next day they came her and took her and her son and they disappeared. We could never find out. So they either killed them, shot them, or sent them to Siberia. We don't know what happened there.
They just came and took
Because
them.
my father tried to inquire and wrote everywhere and what. We didn't know. Nobody knew what happened to them. All we found out that at night came secret police, and first they took her husband away, and then the next day they took her and her son. So that family disappeared, complete.
For what reason?
A communist.
Yeah, but
Somebody must have denounced them or what, you know? We don't know.
Jeez.
We have no idea.
Would that
I don't even remember. I know his name was Dillman, and that's all I know.
Were you afraid for yourself?
No, we were on the outskirts of Russia. It was German occupation. When the revolution came, we were under German occupation. Then a few years later, there was all kind of fighting. The Germans lost the war, yeah. They left our country. Then the Latvians came up. And the Latvians, not in our town, we were a little bit further away from the Russian border, but in Riga, where Olga was, the communists still ruled there for a time. And Olga went through horrible times as a child. She was 9 years old. They stuck her in the hospital as a nurse. And that's where she contacted typhus. And I saw pictures with that poor little girl in a nurse's uniform, and you know, she lost her hair and everything, and she worked so hard. So many, Cindy, so many people went through such hard time that sometimes I tell I had it hard. I don't think I had it as hard as those people who were involved in the wartime.
Is that how you met Olga over there?
No, I met Olga here in New York. Yeah, and Olga, that's also a story how I met Olga.
We'll talk about that when we get to that point. So you never went to college?
No, I didn't go to college, but in my last school year, I was preparing to be a teacher. I was very good in school. I had very good grades and all that. And the teachers prepared me. I went with them like a teacher's aide, you know. Here an hour, there an hour, or a few hours. And that's how we became teachers at that time. You didn't have to go to college to be a teacher. You had to have good grades, because we learned very good, you know, we had a wonderful education. We learned literature, we learned languages, and we learned many subjects, you know, that I even had Latin in school, but then after half a year the Latin teacher had to go to war, and he was drafted, and then we didn't have a teacher, so we stopped that. But I was all prepared. This was in the spring. I finished, in June or whenever it was. And I went the summer, by myself. I had learned English for 3 years. I loved English language. I loved to read English writers like Dickens and Thackeray and all these old writers, you know. And our English teacher, she was very happy that one of the girls liked English so much. So she gave me lessons in the afternoon, and she worked with me. And so I was very good in English. And I was supposed to teach too then. And I was riding sailing with somebody. I don't think it was Harold. He was away at that time. But Harold's brothers, you know, they were the Günther and Paul. And we were on a sailboat, and we were racing. It was such a nice wind. And next to us, a boat was racing. And there was a young man, and you know, and you want to win, and they want to win, and we start to talk and all that. And I found out he is from Denmark or somewhere. He was an importer, and he imported flour, I think. And he had an office, and we start talking and he says, what will you do when you, finish, when you, next fall? I say, I'm going to teach and all that. And he says, what will you teach? I say, yes, English and maths, because those were my strongest subjects. And he says, well, you don't get paid much a teacher, especially in the beginning. I say, no, I won't get paid much, but I'll make it, you know. And he said, how about working for me? I'll give you a job in the office. Can you type? I said, yeah, I can type. I still type with 3 fingers. And I say, I can type pretty fast and all that. He says, and what? I had learned bookkeeping. Yeah, what was it? I must have worked in between already in some kind of office where I learned a little bit bookkeeping or what. So, and he offered me wages for, I don't know anymore what it was, but for that time it was so good, you know. And I said, sure, I'll come and work for you. I went to my father and said, oh, I have a wonderful offer. I'm going there. His name was Jensen. I have all my recommendations yet from all these people, you know. And they all say she worked as an English correspondent and did a little bookkeeping and all that. So the thing is, also my father was very well known. He was a head bookkeeper, now they would say accountant or what, in City Hall. And he had to, you know, he knew everybody. Everybody mentioned his name, Meyran. I got the job right away. I never had the trouble to get the job. I got the job right away.
Well, you said you were cute too. I'm sure that had.
No, not no. At that time, they didn't look.
It wasn't like that.
Only what you can produce. That's the only thing that counted. And of course, the name. You know, I hear it's not what you know, who you know.
Right.
Yeah. So I got the job right away, and from there I went to Jensen. And boy, I tell you, when I think today, at that time, you know, the money market was so complicated. Like in the morning, a mark was that much, or a ruble, or a dollar, or what, you know, and you had to follow all the rate. There was no radio yet. Was there radio already? Must have been radio. Got news somewhere. I watched some kind of, for the, you know, how the money was. And he left everything. He didn't like to work. He liked to go sailing and having a good time. He was away from there, from Holland or whatever, Denmark, wherever he was from. I forgot it. And so he left everything in my hands. And I had to watch the cursos, they call it at that time. What do they call it, you know, when the money, different money and different value of money. And it was fluctuating all the time. In the morning it was that much, or in the evening. And he put it all in my hands. I could buy money and sell money and you know, do all the papers.
Wow.
I to this day, I don't know how I did it, but that was good.
So you had left home to go to this place. How far was it?
No, I went every morning to work and went home at night. Yeah. I had my bike. I could ride my bike to work.
How long did you do that?
I have to look up in the paper.
Right.
I would lie if I know. A year or a year and a half or so. Then I got another. Then Harold already had decided to go to America. And then I worked then from there I went to Germany, I think. You know, wherever he was, I had to go. He was a very selfish lover. If he went somewhere, I had to go, come hell or high water, I had to go there. When he went back to Germany to study, you know, at university, I had to go there. And it was almost impossible to get a visa. So I was very lucky. My girlfriend, my friend, I would say. She was not too close a friend, but she was a friend. And she had married a German book editor. He had a big business editing books in Leipzig. And she invited me as a guest. That's how I could get into Germany. And he employed me there. The work there I had, by that time with my 3 fingers, I typed so as fast as you can talk. And he, you know, at that time the writers always sent in their books, whatever they wrote, in longhand. And that was very hard to read. And I was good in deciphering handwritings. So I had to type. So he could put it in for the printers, you know. So all these books that were written, I had to type over in, you know, in typewriter, and that was my job there. And I worked for him also, what was it, year and a half. In the meantime, I waited for Harold was ready on the way to America. No, I'm lying. That was not in yet. I mix up the
That's
years.
right. Well, what you said...
First, Harold and I was in Hattenstein. I was working for Erich. Harold was in Mittweida, which was not far away, maybe 50, 60 miles, the college town. And we met weekends all the time. Either he came to Hattenstein, they invited him, they met him, or I went to meet him there where he was, And we used to hike. They were beautiful. They call it like the Switzerland of Saxony or something, mountains, very, very beautiful. And we met weekends. But then came the Big Depression and the economy, when all the $1 million and marks and what. And like in the morning you had $3 million and you could buy in a roll. At night you couldn't even buy a piece of paper anymore for the same money. It wasn't worth anything. That time was terrible when there was the money to fool around and all that. So when his father sent him money for college, he used to send him every week. If he sent it off like Saturday from Latvia, from Liba, he got it on Monday, it wasn't worth a penny anymore.
So you're saying Grandpa was in college? Your husband?
He was 2 years in college.
Okay.
Yeah.
While you were working?
He, civil engineer, he was studying engineering.
So he went 2 years in college?
Yeah.
And he didn't finish?
No, he couldn't finish because then he had to give it up because he couldn't exist anymore. So when he went back, I had to go back with him. I said, I don't want to go. I had such a wonderful job and I enjoyed it.
Why couldn't he exist anymore?
Because he had no money at all and no jobs. We were not allowed to have jobs. I was lucky to have a job with Eric, but I worked more or less, I don't even know if they paid me, for my, room and board there. And I want to stay near Harold, And then Harold, you have to come, I don't want to go, I like my job. No, so, all right, I went back with him then. And then he only went to America from Liba. He went back to Liba, we thought we could do something there, and we couldn't. He couldn't find a job, there were no jobs, it was terrible, terrible time. And so he went from uncles and aunts and cousins and whatnot and collected money to get a ticket to go to Cuba. Because at that time, see, that is the most interesting part for you kids, how he got here to America.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Okay, I'm going to stop for a sec. Okay. We're going to talk about...
Your grandfather had a very hard time to get to America because at that time we couldn't get a visa. There was quota of 70 people a year for the whole country of Latvia, and there were thousands and thousands of people who had signed up. Everybody wanted to go somewhere else where they could make a living. So he was talked in by a steamship company that if he goes to Cuba, he'll be able to go into America, United States. Now this young kid who never had really been away from home and hardships and what, somehow or other, with all the relatives, he went begging around and got the money together to buy his ticket. And he went from country to country. They had collected 5 or 6 people, who were going to Cuba by steamship. But they had to go first through Poland and Germany and Holland and Paris and Spain till they got to Portugal. I think that boat left from Portugal to go to United States. And finally he reached Cuba, And when he got to Cuba, he found out that he needed a visa to get into the United States, which he didn't have. He had no money, he had spent all his money he really describes, one guy had only a loaf of bread and a shirt. That's how he went to America from Europe. He had no money at all. but we have paid for his ticket, Well, he lost track, and luckily, because he was a big crook and he was trying to steal from whoever he could steal. Well, he hung around the port there in Havana, and he worked whenever he could get a little job, to load boats or something. He did it. He slept outdoors, and he got very sick. He had, I think it was typhoid fever or something, and they picked him up and brought him to the hospital, and of course, being young and strong, he got over it, and then he succeeded to get a job as a seaman on a boat that brought wood from Cuba to New York City, and from Cuba to the other end of Cuba, Santander or whatever it was called. I have to look up the map, I don't know. And he made 3 or 4 trips to United States. He had an old uncle there, somewhere, he didn't even know where. Somehow or other he got in contact with him. So he figured in Brooklyn, he lived in Brooklyn, if he has an uncle in Brooklyn, he'll skip out. And he skipped a boat and he came in as an alien. And finally he succeeded to get to Brooklyn and find this old uncle who couldn't help him much. He was very poor himself. But anyway, he helped him with, give him a little advice and that. And he was a very good-looking, tall young man. And he went into a car wash, a garage. And they hired him and he washed cars. And by washing cars, he had to learn how to drive. And he was very alert and, I guess young people pick up driving very quick, not like old grandma, I never learned to drive. And when he washed the cars and brought them back and forth, he met a millionaire in New York City. His name was Hemmerdinger. And he was importing cigars and stuff from Cuba, and he was a millionaire. He had a big cigar business or what. And he liked Harold very much, and he says, can you drive the car? He says, yes. He says, oh, my old chauffeur died, and he hired him as a private chauffeur. So here he became a private chauffeur with a beautiful uniform, and the man liked him so much he practically adopted him. Wherever this man went traveling, they took him along, And then my husband had saved up enough money to pay for my passage. And, shall I tell the truth? Of course, I couldn't get the visa either. So he paid $500, or was it $350? It was a big amount for those years, in 1927, to the paymaster on a boat, who accepted me as a stewardess. And he wrote me right away that you can come over, go, and you'll be hired up as stewardess, you'll have no trouble, I paid for your passage and all that. So that's what I did, and then I had to quit that good job in Dresden with the library and all that, I just loved it. But of course, I couldn't go back on my word after he went through all that for me. So I went to Danzig, which is, what is the name now, Russia, because the Russians own all that. Anyway, Klaipeda, no, Gdynia was called later on. And I got tired and I came on a boat, and of course that's another story, how I became a stewardess, because I had never even seen a cabin, I didn't know anything, and had to scrub and everything in my beautiful clothes. Well, anyway, I got to America, and when I came, I had a beautiful trousseau, all handmade, beautiful underwear with laces and things, the way they did it in Europe when you get married,
Okay, now let me stop you there for 1 minute. We skipped something, I guess. We never talked about you guys getting married.
Huh?
We never talked about you guys getting married.
Well, I'll tell you.
Okay.
I'll tell you about married. Well, anyway, I came, first I had to come down the boat to get married.
So you weren't married yet?
No, no, no. We
Okay.
were engaged.
Okay.
We were engaged.
Okay.
So I came down the boat. The stewardesses, everyone, don't take anything off your good clothes. Put all the dress you have on. Take only your toothbrush if you want, but don't take anything. We'll bring it all down and you'll get all your, suitcases with your clothes and shoes and what. So I believed them. And when I asked for permission to go to land, they interrogated me very much, but they knew that I would go. Everybody knew, all the other stewardesses, and they knew exactly that I would never come back. My mind was made up. Never do I go back on that boat with those people. What I went through on that boat, that's a story by itself. So anyway, I come down, and I remember my husband, he was a young boy with knickers, at that time the boys wore short pants, and open collars, and just like kids nowadays, they all wear t-shirts, but at that time they looked just as, uncouth. They didn't look like men or gentlemen. I see a man in a beautiful black suit, or no, gray suit, I think it was, with a red tie and a big bouquet of roses standing there. And I look, say, I'll never forget that moment. Is that you? You're a gentleman. You're not a boy anymore. It was such a shock to me because I had left a young boy and here a man, and he takes me to that limousine, that beautiful car. His boss had given him the limousine to pick me up at the boat, and he gave him 7 days off for a honeymoon, So of course, we had decided to get married. Well, our wedding day, we always celebrate from the day I arrived in America. Actually, by law, we were not married. But here I was afraid. I was an alien. He was an alien. And to go to City Hall and all that and ask for papers. So I said, we don't have to get married. We love each other. We went through so much hardships, I say, we'll just live together. And of course, the way it goes, we were in love, and 1, 2, 3, I was pregnant. My poor father, I would let he couldn't get over it, that I'd live as a man and I'll have a child, and I was so proud of it. I say, we choose to have a child. We didn't choose, it was an accident.
And that was,
And so, anyway, and Harold, my husband here at that time, he said, now we have to get married. We have a child and it's better to be married. So we went to City Hall to get married. That was 3 months after I got it. It wasn't December. We really actually married. I got here in September. But our wedding day, we considered, we got married, we decided to get married, and nobody else has to tell us. So we always celebrate the 9th of September. 9th of September.
1927?
1927, yeah, when I arrived there. I arrived on the 9th of September, 1927. So, he takes me into City Hall. I knew English, I could talk and all, but the way they talk there, here comes a judge, or the magistrate, or whatever it was, and he had prepared all the papers, Harold, already, we had to sign before marriage life. I think you had to wait 3 days or something. Well, I didn't know how to travel in New York City. Everything was strange to me. So if he picked me up in a car and took me somewhere, that's where I was. So he took me downtown, and Wall Street was a big courthouse, and a judge, and he married us. And he said, whoa, I didn't understand a word. We had no witnesses. You have to have 3 witnesses when you sign the marriage vows and all that. So we paid, I think, $4 or $5 each man to be witness for us. Some office workers around there. And all of a sudden, the judge talked to us, and after all the papers were signed, and Harold puts his arm around and starts kissing me, and I say, my goodness, here with all these people. And he says, well, the judge told me, kiss your wife. that was my wedding. And he went back to work because he didn't have much time off. He had to take his boss out somewhere in the evening. So on my wedding day, he went back to work. He took me home, and then I cooked dinner for him, and we... I didn't know how to cook at that time, but just make boiled potatoes. And he loves herring and boiled potatoes. My wedding dinner was boiled potato and herring with sour cream. I mean, it sounds funny to me now myself, Cindy, but that is the honest truth. That's how it was. That's how I got married. And no wedding dress, nobody I knew about, no big doing or what.
You didn't have any problem being aliens?
No, I was afraid all the time, but nobody paid attention to me. And that's when times got harder and harder. We got into the depression and all that. You know, I was scared to death to even look for somebody to help me. We did it on our own. And that's when my hard times really were. And then by that time I had already 3 kids. That was the hardest time, you know, 1932, 30. When Ralph was born, we had that little business in Asbury Park, you know, or Belmar.
So you were pregnant.
Oh yeah, and then I was pregnant, yeah. Anyway, I went to work here and there, whatever I could get, you know, most horrible things. Cleaning rooms for people and going in a factory and whatever. There were no jobs. It was, the economy was so already that, and especially a stranger like me. And I know I went 6th Avenue, had a lot of employment agencies. But what they were, you have no idea, Cindy. Holes in old houses. You crept up steps. You were afraid to go in there. It looked so dubious, you know. And my biggest shock was once I applied for some kind of job, and he listened to me and he says, "No, I don't have a job for you." But, and he comes up and he lifts my skirt. "Let me see your legs," you know. He says, "You could go on the stage and be a little dancer or something." I was so shocked that a stranger would come to me and lift up my skirt and look at my legs. I ran out and I never went. Then I only went to look in the paper and read the ads and went, you know, applied for ads and all that. And it was hard. I didn't know the city. I didn't know how to travel. New York City. And then I was pregnant and I was sick and I had to throw up every day. I think it's a change of climate. And on a job, that's why I quit one job after the other. If I had to throw up too much, I had to quit, you know. And different experience I had that I had to quit. Because people there, they didn't respect the woman or anything, and I was not used to that. Breathing on your back and putting your hands on your shoulders and touching you and feeling you, you know, these guys in a factory that give you a job. It was awful. But that was the hardest thing. It's not the work I'm complaining or what, but the hardest to overcome was this class distinction and to feel you're so low, you know, that people dare. In Europe, nobody would dare to touch my father's daughter like that or what. And that's what I tell Vink sometimes. Oh, many people this. I say, Vink, you have no idea what you go through when you come in contact with completely different class of people that you have no idea about. And you feel abused, you feel dirty, you know, and all that. I say nowadays, going through life and knowing so much more, I would shake it up and laugh, you know, and just tell them, beat it or something, you know. But at that time, I was highly insulted of them. And to overcome that feeling was real hard.
So
that's why I say, you know, I had a little talk. Are you still taping? Mm-hmm. I had a talk with Christina about aliens and all that. I say, Chris, don't judge aliens. You know, she was talking about the Mexicans that come in here and get jobs and they have to pay so much taxes to give them food stamps and all that. I say, don't talk about it. You don't know what you go through to be an alien and to come into this country. But why did they come then? I say, they had no way to live. They want to eat. They go wherever there's food, you know. And that's what it is, you know. I say, you should be glad. And I say, if I don't give you anything, I have no money to leave you or what, but I gave you the citizenship of America. Mm-hmm. And don't ever forget it. You don't know what that means. To be born in America and to have a citizenship here. Because you don't know how these people suffer to get that little green card. Or what. Now it's a green card. It took me years and years, Cindy. I finally became a citizen. And it took me years and years and years. Books like that, investigations and whatnot. And trying to come in through Canada, and they tried. I had a lawyer, a woman lawyer. Also, I got it through a good friend to David. You know, I talked about Frank Lloyd Wright's pupil. David, he helped me. And Mrs. Roosevelt, he had connections with the lawyer of Mrs. Roosevelt or something. It was a very liberal woman. Already the woman movement had started or what. I think I destroyed her letter where she wrote me about, you know, she helped me. I got help. I didn't pay for it. They got interest in my faith through David. He helped me, and they tried everything to get me to become citizen.
Who was David?
David is, I told you, David I met on my first job when I was a waitress. He was a student of architecture.
Oh, okay. All right, we'll get to that later.
Yeah,
okay.
And then he went to Frank Lloyd Wright and he married in the meantime, and I met his wife, and we became good friends.
So you were...
And David is dead. I just saw it on the calendar. He died the 22nd of April, a couple of years back.
Sorry.
And he was 16 years younger than I.
Okay. So at this point you're pregnant and you're not happy and
Well, I mean, I'm not happy.
Well, because you're not happy with your jobs and you're sick. And
oh no, I'm not happy. Don't talk happy. I couldn't hold them.
Yeah.
I was so sick, you know. So then I met Olga. We didn't know what to do because Harold, all right, we could live and I could have had a baby. We lived in a furnished room. And Harold had met a girl when I was before I was here. A very beautiful girl from Riga. And they became friends and always talked. And Meta knew Olga.
Meta was the girl.
Meta is the girl that Harold had met somewhere, I don't know where. And he went out with her a couple of times. She was a beautiful girl. When I saw her, I said, oh my gosh, I'd say, she's so beautiful. How come you still love me, you know? But anyway, and Meta knew Olga. They both from Riga. See, I'm from Liba. Because those two women were from Riga. And she says, I'll get you, I want you to meet Olga. She's a wonderful person and I like her very much. And she might be helpful and suggest something because she was here maybe 2 years longer than I, and she knew. And I met Olga and we talked it over. The only way to save money was to buy an apartment in New York City, you know. You can buy furnished apartments of 6 or 7, in those days, 7 rooms, and rent out the rooms to people who work there. And so my room and the kitchen I had for myself. I could live then without paying rent because I took care of these rooms and I took in renters. And there was one little room, it wasn't half the size of this room. And Olga said, you know what, it's hard to rent that little room, but I live. Olga wasn't married then yet. And she went to night school because she couldn't finish her education in wartime. And she was very ambitious. And she worked in a bakery. So Olga and I became good friends, and she lived there with me then. I rented that little room. And at night she came home and she studied, you know. For high school she worked very hard.
High school?
But she took high school course. because she couldn't finish the school in the water. I told you, 9 years old, the communists stuck her into the hospital to work. So she finished, made her high school degree, and then she met Fritz, and they married, you know, in a bakery. He was a baker, and she's a sales girl. And that's how those two met. And anyway, Olga was 2 years already, and as you know, Olga, they were very saving, and what, she had a little bank account. We had no money, except what Harold brought in every week. She says, I'll sign the papers for you to guarantee the loan. Go to the bank and get I think we got $300 or what. For that we could buy the apartment. Of course we had to pay rent, but we bought all the furniture and everything what was in this apartment. And I could stay home and throw up as much as I wanted. All I had to do, creep around and clean the rooms, you know. So that's why I say, Cindy, homeless and what? I have no sympathy. If you have to work and you want to survive, you do it. And you can. In this country, you can.
So your first, so you were landlords then?
I was a landlord all of a sudden, and we saved up about, again, 300. We paid off our debt, you know, and we had money to buy a little gasoline station. Harold went in business, and he had a gasoline station. But then, that was 1930. See, Ralph was 1 year old when we moved to Belmar. And the way Ralph was born, I always say, hey, but anybody should know what I went through, all alone. Harold somewhere on a trip. In the middle of the night, my water breaks. I don't know what to do. I'm all alone in America. We lived in Harlem on 124th Street. At that time, Harlem was not so bad, you know. It was near Columbia University and all that. But anyway, no telephone. I didn't have a telephone till these kids, 1945 was when they came back. That's when I had my first telephone. Anyway, in here with my pains, nobody around me, Harold away, what will I do? I had to get up and go to the drugstore. The drugstore was open all night. There's around a couple blocks away. And here I'm ready to give birth, and a guy accosts me yet from the back. He didn't see that I was pregnant like that.
Oh my God.
It was about 3 o'clock at night. I walked there to the telephone to call a doctor to ask what I should do. And I turned around and I stuck my belly and I'll say, what do you want for me? Don't you see that I'm giving birth every minute? And he ran away, whatever he was at. Yeah. So anyway, I got in touch with the hospital or what, because I had a doctor at that time, a woman doctor. But also, Cindy, my first experience to get examination, I didn't know what it was. I had no idea. I go to a doctor, he says, go in that chair, now take your panties off and spread your legs. I say, me? Take my panties off. I took my clothes, and I run out and run away. I came home and I cried. And Harold said, what's the matter with you? I say, I can't go through with that. I won't do it for any strange man and take my pants off and show my private parts and all that. So we waited. I say, I don't care what happens. The child will be born, let be born. I'm not going to a doctor. So then I got sicker and sicker and started throwing up, and Harold said, there must be something wrong, you have to go to the doctor. So we took the telephone book and we studied and studied till we found a woman doctor. And I went to her and I told her my story, and she was so sweet. She explained everything and how it will be and how the child will be born, and I don't have any reason to be ashamed and all that, you know. And she was really wonderful. But she says, I don't do any deliveries. I can treat you prenatal care, but I'll recommend you to a doctor and you'll have a doctor. So I called a doctor. It was Sunday. This happened Saturday night, 3 o'clock, when my water broke, and I had to go and find a doctor. Then Olga came home. She worked late, you know. And Olga took me to the hospital because we couldn't find Harold. He was driving around. We didn't know where he was. She took me to the hospital and she left me there then. This was Saturday night, you know. And then Sunday afternoon, Ralph was born. But this doctor was like an animal, you know. I don't think he needed to be born with instruments. That's why Ralph had that big, he still has a scar on his head. And he must have pulled him out by his head. And I was half unconscious or what, you know. And then they came all of a sudden, the doctor comes in nurse state and said, where's your husband, where's your husband? I said, I have no idea, he's a private chauffeur and he's working. I can't get in touch with him. They said, we don't think that child will survive. He had a hemorrhage in his brain. So they said, we need a blood transfusion right away. So they packed me up, and you see, the children's hospital was on the 7th floor. It was on Amsterdam Avenue there, a big hospital, and I was about 3rd floor or 4th floor. So they took me up, and they made a blood transfusion, and then somehow Olga called around and called here and there, and word got to Harold. He was in Asbury Park, and he came racing to New York. Monday morning he appeared in New York, and they gave another blood transfusion to Ralph from Harold's blood. So actually me and Harold saved his life. And then they, you know, not only that, he had at that time 14 days in the hospital, you know. And here I was laying and crying, and I didn't know, and I wanted my child, and I couldn't see my child was on 7th floor. I was here. And then finally they came to me and they said, well, you have to leave him here for another week or 2 till he's stable, and then you can take him home. But we don't know if he might be retarded or something, because he had that hemorrhage, you know, and that was from the, I swear it was from the instrument. Nowadays I would have sued the doctor. I found out later he wanted to go to a party and he rushed the baby, you know. So anyway, but you have to bring him up, bring him back in a year's time, and we'll give him another test and see how it develops. And look what became of him. He's a darn smart guy.
Yeah.
That's why I say never despair in life, Cindy.
Yeah.
You don't know. You don't know what will be. You don't know what you do, if it'll come back to you, somebody else, like Karen. I don't want to be Cherry Case. I don't want to do this. I can't ask Cindy. I say, if Cindy offers, accept it, Karen. Maybe someday Cindy will be in a position that you can help, but you never know what life brings.
So you were now, you had Uncle Ralph with, when Grandpa was still a chauffeur.
Yeah.
And you were still a landlord.
Yeah, we were still landlord.
So
then after Ralph, how old was he? He must have been 6 months.
And then you got the
Then
gas station.
we sold the apartment, and he bought that little gasoline station and moved to Belmar, South Belmar.
New Jersey?
Yeah, New Jersey, at the ocean. It's not far from Asbury Park.
Right.
And Spring Lake, you know, we were right in the middle. And everything went fine, and Harold was so proud. At that time, he didn't drink, he didn't smoke, nothing. He was a wonderful guy, just my guy, you know. And Ralph was, how old was he? I waited for Harold. He came, we had an old Ford Flivver, you know, with the roof. Every time, we lived in a little street. And when he came around the corner, I could hear that roof, clip, clap, clip, clap. Then I could put the dinner on the table. That's how we lived. And one night he didn't come home. He always was home. Never had any argument or anything like that, like what women go through nowadays, you know.
So he didn't come home one night?
One night he didn't come home. 11 o'clock. I was so worried. I thought he's killed or what and what. He comes home drunk. First time I saw him drunk. I thought he's deathly sick. He was so pale, he could hardly walk. And, you know, he always, when he came home, he always looked at Ralph, at the baby first, to see. And he goes in there, and he doesn't come out. And I see he fell over the crib, was hanging there, and I dragged him out, dragged him to his bedroom. I thought, gosh, he's dying. I didn't know. I had never seen a drunk person. And I took his shoes off and everything. Come the next morning, he says, I don't know what happened to me. These guys came in and talked, and they gave me something to drink, and I just passed. How he came home, I don't know. If they brought him home, maybe they brought him home, I don't know. That was the first time he started to drink.
Do you know anything about his parents?
His parents, they never, not that I know anything.
No alcoholism?
But his grandfather was an alcoholic. Waldy told me after that he had big property and real estate, and he drank and gambled everything away. That must be through skipping a generation and you know.
So you had the gas station, you had a new baby.
I had a new baby, had a gas station. Haley was on its way. I was pregnant again then. And everything went fine for, I would say, when did we move in there? Maybe in the spring and to the fall, till winter came. You know, it's a summer resort. After the summer people went away, sure, we had plenty of customers, but they didn't pay. Nobody had money. And he had to give them on credit and credit till one good day he couldn't pay the company anymore, and he had to lock the door and walk away. He couldn't do anything. And he just had bought a new cash register. Because beginning we had just a little drawer where he put the money in, and he was so proud of that cash register, you know. Maybe he had it 1 or 2 months, I don't know.
So you closed that place down?
Closed down and left everything the way it was. Who took over? I guess the cash is the company took the cash register, and the companies didn't pay. And that was. Well, by that time we lived already in South Belmar, in a house, you know. We had moved, and after the spring everything went fine. He brought money home, you know, and Haley was born there. Yeah, we must have been in South Belmar. We lived in that house already. We rented a house. Was one of his customers, a rich guy. He had a couple houses. It was a very cute little house. And I think 2 bedrooms and a living room and a kitchen. And I know there was a little porch, and I planted these honeysuckle and all that. I have a picture of it where I sit with Haley and Ralph on that porch. And then it got worse and worse, and Harold couldn't get the job, couldn't get money, and then it was real bad. But he could get the job washing floors. One of his people he knew, and he had to go, you know, in the office. But he got $3 a week, $3.50, something like it. And here I had 2 kids, and Harold, me, and an old lady who lost her job too, and she didn't have any place to go.
How was your second pregnancy?
Wonderful, nothing. I wasn't sick. We lived in a, you know, country already. The air was good. I think coming from Europe and going into New York City and breathing all that gasoline, exhaust, and change of climate and excitement, that's what made me. I was throwing up till the last day that Ralph was born. But he came out all right.
So when you...
Well, we were very healthy. We never fooled around, neither I nor Harold, you know. And he never had a girl before he married me and all that stuff. So we were real healthy people.
So when Mom...
And then Mom was born, we lived already in Spring Lake. That was a beautiful hospital in a little park. I loved that hospital. But I didn't have a doctor. I had to go on social. You know, we had no money. So she was born. She didn't come and didn't come and didn't come. And then one night I said, Harold, we have to take a ride. I can't carry the child anymore. And so we rode in that old flivver, you know, up over dales and whatnot. And I came home that night and the pain started. And it was also a Sunday night. She would have been born Sunday. But then I had suffered already gallbladder attacks when I was pregnant. was rough. And when the pains came on, I had another gallbladder attack. And we had to call a doctor, and he gave me a shot, and he said, you wouldn't survive those 2 pains, giving birth and that. So somehow he stopped the birth pains. And then Haley was born the next day, else she would have been born that same time, yeah.
So now you have
And she was the easiest birth I had. She just came out like that. No pain, nothing in the morning. And a beautiful baby, and Harold crazy with joy because they were only boys in their family. And when Ralph was born, he was so disappointed he wanted a girl. So that was his first girl. And he was so happy.
So now you have 2 kids.
Now I have 2 kids, and then came this hard time, but I couldn't pay my electric bill, my gas bill. I had to. You went through that with Davy. I told the story. How I went to the beach and collected wood and make little fire in the basement. We had a little stove that we heat the hot water, and that's how I cooked. I lived on bacon rinds and old vegetables. That's what I learned, and it's still till today. I don't want to pay 40, 50, cents for something that I can get for 25 cents. And I could make wonderful dinners. If I had potatoes and bacon, and I used to go, at that time they didn't have these big markets. They had a greengrocer and a little butcher, and that even in New Jersey, all little different stores. And they knew me already, and when I came, he says, here in the back is, they peel the lettuce off for the spinach and whatever, and I picked out what I got for 5 cents. I got a meal.
Okay, and then you got pregnant again.
Well, then Karen was on its way already while we moved over there, or while we lived there. We lived there a few years. And luckily, to this day, that man said, you don't have to pay. Nobody has money. Just live as long as you want here. And we stay. I didn't pay for a whole year in that thing. I got away with it. And I owed the milkman. I still have the bill here. I found it the other day. $38.50. He brought me milk, and he said, don't worry, don't worry. He saw me with all these little kids, and I couldn't pay the milk bill. And then after we went to the city and got more, I looked for him and I wrote, and I went to send him money. I couldn't find him. He said, he must have lost his job or what. And
so were you still having problems with Grandpa?
No, I had no. That was
one incident.
Oh, that was an incident here. Once he came home with a black and blue eye. I have never seen. I think he used to. Well, the boys beat him up. They started a fight. I don't know what. At the gasoline station, there was always hanging around the rough crowd. He didn't even want me to get there, and I was so shocked. I can't describe the feeling, Cindy. Because in our circles, nobody would lift a hand or punch you in the face or what. Here the Americans are different, even millionaires punch each other. But when he came back with a blue eye, I cried my eyes out. I thought, well, now I'm really sunk to the bottom. It couldn't get worse. That went by too. And then when I think of the Christmas, how poor we were, and he went out to buy Christmas presents for the kids, and he didn't come back, and I didn't know, and I said, no, my kids couldn't have Christmas tree. We had little cedar bushes in front of that. I went out and I cut the cedar bush, and I trimmed it, and when I was ready trimming, here he comes. He had gone to New York to shop in some outlet store or what, and he came with dolls and toys and whatnot. And we had Christmas.
So you had Aunt Karen then?
Yeah, Karen, poor Karen, she wasn't even paid for. That's why she always tells me, that's why I'm so miserable, you didn't even pay for me. I had Karen. We had nothing, Cindy. We were so poor. And nobody knows how poor we were, And I had to go to the hospital. The baby was coming. So I went to the hospital, and they took me in. At that time, the public ward, there were maybe 20 people, 20 beds in one ward. And only the interns take care of you. Every 10 minutes, another intern comes and pokes around your belly and pokes around you and handles your breasts and whatnot. I don't think they needed so much. They were all looking for cancer or what, That's what they said. It was terrible. It was so degrading. But I know I had to have the baby. What could I do? And then, when the baby was almost ready to come, they brought me into the delivery room. They couldn't find the doctor. And they were running around or what. And here I'm in agony, heaving and heaving, the baby wanted to come. And you know what, that lousy nurse, she took my legs and crossed and held them so the baby shouldn't come till the doctor comes. That's why it wouldn't have been a hard birth. But that's what really, I thought I'll die. I thought I'll bust in 1,000 pieces. How I survived. That's all right.
So how did
So anyway, and that time too, we were 10 days in the hospital. So now the baby can go home and I can go home. And Karen was a beautiful baby. Karen was, when she came out, she was white and golden hair and rosy cheeks. She was a real little beauty. Haley was beautiful in a different way, healthy looking and these brown sparkling eyes. But Karen was really a little beauty, absolutely not touched by going through that kind of birth and all that. And I couldn't go home. I stayed another day there. You have to pay for the baby. They don't let you go if you don't pay the bill. So what could Harold do? That's where he became a cook. He made a check, and he knew there was no money in the bank, and he gave him a check. And then we were home about 10, 14 days, and then they kept sending threatening letters and threatening letters and threatening letters. Well, we had no money. What can we do? So they forgot about it. In those days, I guess it was common because people had no money. And as I say, I didn't have a private doctor or anything.
Wow.
And then when Annie was born, then I had worked already and saved money to have a baby. I had a doctor who lived on Park Avenue.
When your children, how did you name your children?
How name them?
Yeah, why Ralph and why Haley?
Well, because I loved the Swedish names. At that time, I read Lagerlöf and all these Swedish stories and Finnish stories, and I was very fascinated by the Norse and Sweden and Norway because they were very progressive countries, even then already. And I liked all these northern names. So Ralph was Ralph, with an F. The Swedish way, they write it R-A-L-F. Haley, Harold and I read a book, and it was a translation from Finnish. And there was a girl in the main character, her name was Haley. And I was thinking, I always liked the sun. In Greek, the sun god is Helios. And I say, Harold, I want that if it's a little girl, I want to call her Haley because it's a sunny, gives me sunny feeling and a happy feeling, and I think it's a beautiful name. And he agreed with me. He thought also it was very beautiful. And to this day, I think it's a very beautiful, and I think she's proud of her name. Mm-hmm. But every time when she talks to me, how did you give me that name? And such a crazy name.
Anyway.
But like when she told me when they called Haley to give her that certificate, she says, well, it sounded like my name. I didn't pay attention. But I could see she's very proud that she has an unusual name. And Karen, of course, is a complete Swedish name. So I had them all. But then when I lived longer in America, I wanted an American name. That's why Donnie is Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm. For any special reason?
For the reason that I like the English names, American names. And I always liked Elizabeth. And Anne, she's Elizabeth Anne. And we decided, Harold was kind of romantic too. Lisan, and we say Anna. My mother's name was Anna. I'd say I want a second name because I don't know anything about my mother, but I want somebody to have a name. So we called her Lizanne, but to register it was Elizabeth Ann. And when she was little, she always dropped the Lee. She always said Zani, 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 Zani. You know, she didn't say Lee, Zani. She said Zani was this and Zani was that, so she became Zani. And she stayed. She liked it, and she stayed, and she wanted to have a name.
Okay, time out.
Yeah. Like the house.